Questions about the Ellis Park disaster that have haunted South Africa were finally answered by an inquiry headed by Judge Bernard Ngoepe. It found that numerous parties were to blame for the 43 deaths which took place exactly 2 decades ago today. To look at how far South Africa has come in addressing the issues highlighted by the Commission, we're joined by former inquiry chair Judge Bernard Ngoepe and former Sports Minister Nqonde Balfour. Good evening to both of you, and thank you so much for your time on News Prime tonight. Judge Ngoepe, perhaps let me begin with you and just start with, it's incredible to me that it's 20 years since we had the Ellis Park tragedy take place, and yet when you speak to some of the individuals who were at that stadium on the day, the families that lost loved ones on that day, it's still so real for them. It's as if this is something that has taken place just yesterday. You had the opportunity, of course, of having to engage all of these stakeholders during the time that you held your commission. Why do you think that that hurt still lingers as much as it does?
Good evening to you, Kathy, and to your viewers. And hello, Mr. Balfour. Losing somebody is very painful. It is something that you'll never forget. And I understand why they still feel the pain. I personally lost 2 children some few years back, and the pain will always be there. And I suppose the Commission was there, among other things, to assuage the pain, to make people who lost their loved ones, to make them realize that we sympathized with them, and the issue was taken very seriously. In fact, it was the then president himself, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, who approached me and said, well, look, Ngoepe, look, because of the gravity of the matter, the importance of this matter, we would like you, as the judge president, to actually chair a commission. And I did that because out of deferment to all the grief that was there and the pain that was there. But of course, the commission could never, at the end, make the pain get away. But it did, however, offer some comfort to an extent to people who lost their loved ones. And I think that they should. I know this would not comfort them fully, but I want them to appreciate that the people who died did not die in vain. Why? Because thereafter a commission was instituted, recommendations were made after thorough investigations by the commission. I even went abroad with Advocate Sminya to go and compare the systems in the United Kingdom, and so we visited various well-known soccer stadiums like the Manchester United one and the like. We came back to make some recommendations. So they should also, while they are still grieving, they should also be comforted by the fact that the death was not in vain, because recommendations came out, and as far as I'm concerned, to a certain extent, if not fully, those recommendations, after they were implemented, they prevented similar tragedies from happening. And that's why I say they should comfort themselves by saying that the death of our loved ones has not been in vain.
Let me bring in here the former Sports Minister, Nqonde Balfour. Mr. Balfour, just listening to what Judge Ngoepe has said in terms of the implementation of those recommendations, do you think that South African sport collectively, even though some of the recommendations were very specific about, the soccer games in particular, but they applied across the board to avoid any tragedy in sport that it would involve thousands of people, do you think that we've been able to do that sufficiently to date?
Molo Kesi and Molo Ngoepe. Yeah, it was a very, very difficult period that we went through. But that commission that Judge Ngoepe Usmenya really tried to put some basic things that needed to be done so that this kind of tragedy does not happen again in our country. So I take my hat off to Judge Ngoepe and the Commission for doing that work, making recommendations and making sure that at least, as he said, it brings some bit of comfort to the families who lost their lives in that. We struggled, as I said, with the police to get into Ellis Park because I just heard about it on the news. Somebody came in and said, Minister, look at the news. I'm sitting in a restaurant. And I don't think I even finished that food while I was eating. I don't even remember. So I tried to get there. And when I did get to the stadium, ministers don't sometimes go to all matches. You go to whatever you want, but you keep an eye because you're an enabler. My first words were, this should not have happened. That's the first word when I saw in each chat the amount of people, 43 people. They body suits and the one that got me really going and crying was a 10-year-old from Ennerdale, if I remember, who had been there with the father because he had said to the father, please don't forget to take me to the game. And he did in his sort of pajamas and got there and never went home.
Judge Ngoepe, when we look at, the work that was done by the commission, there are those who feel that as a result of the recommendations and the fact that they were so broad and touched on so many issues, there was no clear culpability of who should have been held responsible or even accountable for the loss of lives on that day.
Perhaps there was not sufficient particularity with regard to that, but it is clear from our report that we apportioned blame. We blamed management, we blamed the security firm, and because it had transpired that some people who manned the gates from that security company, even though the stadium was beginning to be clear that it's going to be full, they accepted through bribery. They kept on admitting people into the stadium. And we pointed all those things out. And we also indicated that one of the problems was that there was a wrong forecast as to how many people would attend that game. It was a mistake. They underestimated the number of people who were to attend that game. So we did point out clearly where the faults were. And I think, of course, it was not a criminal court. We're not sitting as a criminal court. We're just trying to find out what happened. And to the extent that we're able to do so, we pointed our finger directly to some of the institutions or organizers of the game.
We'll continue our conversation with former Commission Chair Judge Bernard Ngoepe and former Sports Minister Nqonde Balfour after this. You're live on News at Prime. We continue looking back today to the Ellis Park tragedy, which claimed the lives of 43 people. Now, at the time, a commission of inquiry was instituted to look at what had gone wrong that had led to those deaths. Former inquiry chair Judge Bernard Ngoepe and former Sports Minister Nqonde Balfour joining us tonight. Mr. Balfour, let me bring you in here. There has been an acknowledgement from Justice Ngoepe about the culpability, in particular of individuals that many families would have wanted to see in terms of accountability over that tragedy. But the other issue is that even to date, we still have scandals around the issuing of fake tickets that are plaguing sport. Why do you think that is?
Former minister. I'm just Tatu Balfour, that's all. The other stuff that the judge has mentioned in their recommendations, which were very good. Ticketing was not properly done. But always when there is a big match between Orlando Pirates and Kaizer Chiefs, surely you are going to have a lot of people wanting to come to the stadium to see that. And he's quite right with that. It was not about apportioning blame at that time. It was just about understanding what happened, what really went wrong. ukude siswelekelwe ngabantu abayi-43. Noko, there must be some people that we point fingers to. But I think in their recommendations, they did say that the stadium management was ill-equipped for the numbers that came through. Very ill-equipped. And secondly, the security side also did not assist in the whole process, to stop continuing and with people coming into the field. So I still think that those recommendations have been looked at by the judge, the commission, and handed over to the PSL, particularly to both the big clubs, to say, you always know whenever you are going to have a big game, everybody wants to come in. Those are some of the things that they came up with. So I've mentioned ticketing, the stadium management, and the security around the stadium. Very, very lax. But at the end of it, as the judge says, they went to other countries like in Manchester, because there was a Istumo like that in Manchester. They looked at those things and compared them to what we have in South Africa and gave advice, good advice, on how not to go that route ever again.
Judge Ngoepe, let me wrap up with you then and just get a sense from you. Are you satisfied to date with how the fraternity, the sporting fraternity, has responded to that report and the kind of implementation of those recommendations?
Kathy, I'm really reasonably satisfied, and I think we should be thankful that, particularly the soccer administrators, I think they did their best to try and implement those recommendations. In fact, I think since then, there hasn't been any disaster. I know there has been one, but it was precisely because one of the recommendations was not implemented. Some people were guilty of dereliction of duty. That's why we had a disaster not such a long time ago. But I'm quite happy that since Ellis Park, we haven't had any major disaster. And that was precisely because the recommendations were implemented. And coming to think of it, some of the mistakes that were made then were quite elementary. For example, how could you possibly go and sell tickets at the stadium on the very day of the game, and you sell it even as people are coming in? What happens if the tickets run out and people are standing outside, too late to go home and watch the game on television, and at the same time the tickets are sold out? Those were some of very elementary mistakes which were made there, and mercifully they haven't been repeated. And I'm quite happy that the recommendations that came from my commission were implemented, and thus saving lives, which is why I'm saying that if this would be of any comfort to the bereaved families, please let them tell themselves that our people did not die for nothing. Following their death, efforts were taken to investigate, recommendations made and implemented.
All right, let's leave it there for tonight. Former Commission Chair Judge Bernard Ngoepe and Nqonde Balfour, who was the sports minister at the time. Thank you both for your time tonight.